You're listening to the Baumbastic Podcast with Andrew Ellis on Inside Arkansas.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Baumbastic Podcast, presented by Inside Arkansas and hosted by the brilliant, handsome, talented Andrew Ellis. We're back here. It's Monday, March 31st, almost into April, and once we get into April, if it wasn't already baseball season, it's baseball season. So I appreciate you guys for joining me on today's episode of the Baumbastic Podcast. We're going to get into a little bit of some weekend winners, as well as just kind of overall talking about how we feel about this Arkansas Vanderbilt series, which, in case you missed it, went very well. If you did miss it, we did a series recap live stream yesterday, Sunday afternoon, following Arkansas's, I guess, what they win yesterday, 7-3. I can't keep track of all the wins. They win so often. I can never remember the specific scores, but we did like an hour long. I think it was an hour, 15 minutes is what it ended up being. Had a lot of people pull up to that. That was very encouraging. So I appreciate you guys for doing that. And we'll continue to have coverage of each individual game, as well as tomorrow night when the Hogs are in North Little Rock at Dickey Stevens Ballpark. We will definitely have some recap action of that game. Also might have a pretty cool interview that you guys might want to hear coming to the Baumbastic Podcast later this week. Need to figure out a day to do that exactly. But I'm excited about that. A lot of things to be excited about with this Arkansas Razorback baseball team. A lot of things also to be excited about with our Inside Arkansas YouTube channel. So make sure you are subscribed so you're not missing out on any of the action. So subscribe to this YouTube channel. Subscribe to the podcast feeds wherever you get them. Obviously, this podcast feed, the Baumbastic Podcast, is going to be cranking all day, all year long as the Hogs continue their march towards Omaha. But also, there's a lot going on, and you guys don't need me to tell you this. A lot going on in the Arkansas basketball world. I know the season ended last week, but as most of you know, we jump around. We hit the ground running with portal coverage. Curtis Wilkerson, God bless the guy, is just neck deep in shooting percentages and rebounds and numbers, and he's sifting through all these portal contacts and guys that might enter the portal, guys that were in the portal and are out of the portal, and maybe Arkansas is still going to get them. High school recruiting. I mean, the dude's doing it all. So make sure you follow him at the Pot of the Palace on that YouTube feed or that podcast feed over there, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get those. But of course, we will have coverage here on this Inside Arkansas YouTube channel. We actually just did a live stream covering Zvonimir Ivisic, Big Z, as you know him. The first portal entry for the Arkansas Razorbacks. First miniature, not miniature because he's 7'2", but first like small domino of the offseason for the Arkansas Razorbacks as they build that roster. And so we're going to continue to break it all down. It's baseball season. It's portal season. MLB kicked off. March Madness is about to wrap up. It's a really good sports time. So I hope everyone is, having fun, taking this, not taking this stuff for granted and enjoying themselves. And like I said, we're going to have all the action on the Inside Arkansas YouTube channel with basketball, baseball, as well as our Inside Arkansas live daily show every weekday. So you don't want to miss it. Before we get into today's show, I do want to remind you guys, today's show is brought to you by Basis Health. They've been very good to us. Basis Health is changing the way healthcare is delivered by providing mobile medical visits to the comfort of your home. We don't like going to the doctor. It's part of being a man is you don't want to go to the doctor. You get hurt and you say, I'll just rub some dirt on it. You feel a weird chest pain, whatever. You don't feel like going to the doctor. Nobody does. But like I said, Basis Health is changing that a little bit. A doctor will come to your home for urgent care, primary care, IV hydration, and more. Basis Health, they are here for you when and where you need them most, which can be in the comfort of your own home. You can learn more about them at basishealth.org today. Shout out to our guy, Dre, who's been very good to us. He's been tapped in with the program, doing a lot, and they're providing mobile medical care from the comfort of your home. It's a foolproof concept, and so they're very good to us, and we're good to them. We appreciate Basis Health for all they do. And again, shout out to our guy, Dre. So again, as always, on a Monday episode of the Baumbastic Podcast, we do our weekend winners. If you're new to the show, if you're just joining us, if you just got done licking your wounds of basketball season and you've made the trek over to baseball, we always try after each series on Monday to highlight the best individual performances from the weekend. Individual players, of course, but always there's an impact on how it affects the team and which performances stood out because it means a little bit more to some of these guys. Which guys does Arkansas need to get going? And plenty to choose from in a weekend where you go on the road and sweep Vanderbilt in Nashville. So before we get into the individual side of things, I did just want to kind of put a bow on what was a very productive weekend for the Arkansas Razorbacks. Arkansas is now 26-3, 8-1 in SEC play. Just a very gaudy number, a number that like you don't have to really sift through the schedule and find out, oh, how impressive is this? When you're this far into the season and you've got 3 losses, you're doing something right. Weirdly enough, one of those losses came last week against Missouri State. I know a lot of people were not happy about that, but what a way to wash that taste out of your mouth by just going out there and sweeping a top 15 team in the SEC. I believe it was the first sweep for Arkansas in Nashville. I think they said since 94. I've seen like 7 different years referenced in terms of sweeps in Nashville. Point being, it doesn't happen often. Vanderbilt, as we know, has kind of been the cream of the crop in college baseball for a while now. Like, I feel like they've been kind of the standard. Tim Corbin's been there forever, done a really good job. I believe he's the only active coach, at least in the SEC, with multiple national titles, which is always impressive. So they're a program that beating them is always kind of a big deal because it's kind of the program at which all these other programs compare themselves to. I don't know how much that is the case anymore. Vanderbilt, of course, came into the weekend ranked number 14, so it seemed like they've got a pretty good squad. They're most likely going to be an NCAA tournament team. They're now 4-5 in SEC play. But I feel like it was kind of this is the changing of the guard in real time. You see some of these other programs like Arkansas, Tennessee, obviously the defending national champions, even a team like Georgia, who is number 2, number 3, number 4, no matter what poll you look at. Texas with Jim Schlossnagle now is obviously cooking. LSU's always been good. I feel like Vanderbilt has kind of fallen down the hierarchy a little bit. And so I felt that way going into the weekend, but really just watching that series and just seeing Arkansas is a more talented baseball team. They just have more dudes in the lineup. They've got more dudes in the pitching staff. They've got more options. And Arkansas was actually missing a couple of their top guys in terms of the pitching department. And a couple of Arkansas's best players didn't really get it going. I think someone said yesterday was the first game all year where both Aloys played and neither recorded a hit, being Kozeal and Vahiva Aloy. Those are guys that are obviously going to hit much better down the stretch. Bern Iredale got to go with a couple hits yesterday. We're still waiting for him to go on like that real tear, have that 6 of 11 weekend. He will not be a weekend winner this weekend, but I feel like one's coming for him for the big Aussie. But I think, you just saw with this Arkansas team, and I feel like that's kind of been the story of the year, is you're not always going to have everybody firing on all cylinders. It's not always going to go the way you plan for it to go on the pitching staff, on the pitching department. You're always going to have something go awry. But Arkansas just seems to have options. They have depth in the lineup, depth in the pitching staff. They've got lefties. They've got righties. They've got a good mix of skill sets. All along, we've been very high on this roster and just kind of the potential for it. Obviously, Arkansas enters every year projected to be top 5, top 10, whatever it is, projected to be in that mix for Omaha. I mean, I've said it a lot. I'm trying not to be too I'm trying not to make too many crazy proclamations, especially because Arkansas is going to face better competition here very soon. You look at the top 10 in the rankings right now, Arkansas is going to face 5 of those teams in the final 6 weeks of the season. And so certainly some tests where Arkansas, I'm sure, will have, I don't want to say some regression to the mean, but they're not only going to have one loss in SEC play throughout this entire run. Like, someone's going to get them. They are going to lose games. Hell, I'd even be surprised if they didn't lose a series. I think that's certainly going to come. But when I just look at this Razorback team, I think it's the best roster top to bottom I've seen at the University of Arkansas. And now that may sound like a crazy hot take. I'm not saying it super definitively. There's been some very good rosters. I mean, 2018, I've always told you guys, is kind of the roster in which I judge every roster on. That team that had Blaine Knight, Casey Murphy, Isaiah Campbell in the starting rotation. They had Matt Cronin, Barrett Losky, Jake Reindl in the bullpen. I kind of look at that pitching staff, which was very good, and I compare it from a talent standpoint to this year's pitching staff. I don't think there's that much separation. I think this year's pitching staff actually has a few more options because that 2018 team really just kind of made it work with 5-6 guys. I mean, they had some talented names on that roster, like a Jackson Rutledge, a Bryce Bonin, a few other guys there, Evan Lee, who pitched in the big leagues a little bit. Some talented names on that roster, but when the postseason rolled around, it was pretty much a 5-6 man group that got the job done. I feel like this team certainly has more options. I mean, hell, a guy like Christian Fouch, who throws 100 and is going to be like a 5th round pick this year, didn't even get used this weekend. Parker Coyle, a guy that we really like, he was unavailable this weekend. A guy in Will McIntyre who has pitched in a ton of big moments for Arkansas. These guys didn't even pitch this weekend. So you saw Arkansas go out there on the road, sweep Vanderbilt, hold them to only 7 runs, And they really didn't even have to use that many guys. They really didn't have to dig deep and fight through a ton of weird situations. It kind of was I hate to say it, they made it look easy a little bit, especially from a pitching standpoint. It helped when you get all three of your starters go at least 5 innings. We'll touch on them here in a bit. But I look at this team, and from a lineup standpoint, I mean, the lineup is continues to be top 3 in literally every SEC hitting category, both overall and in conference games only. So it's not like they beat up on bad competition, although you could argue South Carolina and Missouri, who they're about to play, would qualify as bad competition. So these numbers might get a little gaudier. But I mean, whether it's been conference games, SEC games, starters, bullpens, closers, lefties, righties, Arkansas's hitting it. The ball looks like a beach ball. It doesn't matter who's throwing it. And so, and when I compare it to that 2018 team, which, like I say, is kind of the standard in which we compare all Arkansas teams, I think this team matches up well. And so that's why, as of today, I say this is the best roster I've seen at Arkansas. And by the way, I felt that way coming into the season. You can pull the receipts if you want. You can go back, and I know some of you have been listening throughout the offseason and listening throughout this entire season. I haven't really I haven't tried to make it like a whole Stephen A. Smith like hot take, like this is the best team ever. Like I really don't want to do that thing. And ultimately, like this team's going to be judged by what they do in the postseason. Nobody cares if you're the most talented roster if you don't win in the postseason, as we know. So that's why I'm really not trying to like make a big deal about it. But like seriously, if you ask me point blank, like, is this the best team you've ever seen at Arkansas? From a just roster standpoint, coaching staff's been the same for most of it. I think this is the best team we've ever seen at Arkansas. And we'll see if they ultimately will end up accomplishing more than any other team at Arkansas. But again, I use that term talented. I do think they're the most talented roster we've seen at Arkansas. And I think there's actually a little bit more in the tank because some of the most talented pieces on this team, particularly in the pitching staff, have not really had a huge impact so far. I mean, Christian Fauch, not a huge impact. Gage Wood, he's been out with an injury. He's going to be a top 200, top 250 pick in the offseason. Hunter Dietz, we haven't seen him throw a pitch. We might not see him throw a pitch, but that's my point, is that like there's actually more talent in the tank for this team. There's another level they could get to, and we'll see if they get to it. But let's move on now to our winners of the weekend. We got to start. I mean, you guys know. We all knew coming into the weekend, we had this guy circled as someone we were going to keep our eye on. We wanted to see him play well, and boy, did he ever. Our first winner of the weekend is Cam Kozeal, the Omaha native and the Vanderbilt transfer, a part of Arkansas' sophomore class. Had a nice freshman season at Vanderbilt, opts to go into the transfer portal. And from what I can tell, that was not a decision that he was like super thrilled about. I don't think he was like dying to get out of Vanderbilt. I think he loved his time there. I think he liked the guys there. I think he liked being a Commodore. I think if it were up to Cam Kozeal, they probably would have just ponied up and given him a ton of money and kept him there. Honestly, but he ends up exploring his options, and hell, Arkansas certainly took advantage of that. Made a nice addition to get Cam Kozeal in the portal. He was one of the many transfers that Arkansas brought in to try and upgrade this roster. And he's been awesome, man. He goes 5 for 12 this weekend, hits 3 home runs in the first 2 games. This dude hit 3 home runs at that same park. He played a full season at Vanderbilt, hit 3 home runs in that park. He plays 2 games with the Arkansas Razorbacks in that same park, hits 3 home runs. He had 2 home runs coming into the weekend. He's now got 5. He's one of the many guys in this Razorback lineup who has been awesome. Cam Kozeal, by the way, on the season, hitting 378 with 5 home runs. Really good stuff. In conference play, through 9 games so far, Cam Kozeal hitting 457. That's 16 of 35. I'm sure those numbers will kind of come back down to earth a little bit. But man, that's big time stuff. He's just been super consistent. He's been, sitting there in that 5, 6, 7 spot of the lineup. And, when teams like to pitch around Bernardo, like to pitch around Kozeal Aloy, Cam Kozeal's made him pay a good bit. And so credit to him for being awesome and becoming the mayor of Smashville, as they described it on the Razorback Twitter account. By the way, drove in 8 runs. Vanderbilt scored 7 runs this weekend. I mean, we're talking about a dude who literally, it's one thing to come, play against your former school and come up with a big hit or maybe have a big game against them. To literally outscore your former school in a weekend series against them while you sweep them in their park, that had to feel good. And again, I don't think Cam Kozeal's like a guy that like wakes up every day with like Tim Corbin's face on his wall and he's like throwing the darts at it. Like, I don't think he like wakes up with that like animosity necessarily for Vanderbilt. just being around Cam Kozeal, I don't think he's a guy that has a ton of animosity towards anybody. I don't think it's one of those situations where he was like waking up every morning like, I'm going to stick it to Vanderbilt. But deep down, it had to feel pretty good for him to ball out against his former school, against a school that, not saying they pushed him out the door or anything. It definitely wasn't like that. But I feel like if you have a freshman who starts for you, has a pretty good year for you, I feel like more often than not, if you really care about that guy, you really believe in him, you probably pony up and keep him. And Vanderbilt did not do that. And that's why Vanderbilt is where they are. And that's why Arkansas is where they are. Arkansas ponied up this offseason and brought in a ton of talent. And you're seeing it pay dividends. And so it's good to see that, particularly when you can do it against the guy's former school. Our next weekend winner, I did the cheating cop-out thing that I like to do, as you know. I lumped two guys into one, mostly because, one, we only have 5 spots here. I really couldn't decide between either of these guys and could have certainly done both and kicked the pitcher out, but I decided not to do that. These two guys, Charles Davalon and Logan Maxwell, combined to go 8 of 25, 4 home runs, 2 doubles, 4 walks, 5 runs driven in, and scored 8 runs. I mean, you want to talk about guys that Arkansas ponied up in the offseason and brought in. Once again, I mean, Charles Davalon at this point is like an automatic winner of the weekend. Like every single week, this dude is on this list, it seems. For the past, 5-6 weeks, he's just been consistently raking. Like, is it at this point, is it not a hot streak? Is he just good? I mean, Charles Davalon, we're, 3 months into the season, 2 months into the season officially. Dude's still hitting over 400. Logan Maxwell not far behind him. Let's see, in conference play, these guys, Charles Davalon's hitting 442. Logan Maxwell hitting 441. For the year overall, Charles Davalon at 402. Logan Maxwell at 373. The dudes have been awesome. These two outfielders, when we went into the offseason, so you remember, I guess it would have been 2 years ago, Arkansas had John Bolton at shortstop and Parker Rowland at catcher. Love both those guys. Consider them allies. Consider them friends. Hogs for life. We love them. But after that 2023 season, we all went into the offseason saying, all right, Arkansas's got to go out there and get a shortstop and a catcher. That has to be priority numero uno in the transfer portal. And Arkansas went out there and got the Hiva Aloy. I don't know if you got heard of him. He's pretty good. He also was a big-time target that a lot of people wanted. And they went out and got Hudson White, who maybe started a little bit slow, but turned out to be a pretty good player. He was also the number 1 catcher in the portal at that time. Was a guy that got drafted last year, had a good year for Arkansas. But again, they went into the offseason saying, hey, we know we got to shore this up. They went out and did it. They wasted no time. Those are the first 2 guys Arkansas brought in portal cycle last offseason. This past year, after the outfield Arkansas had last year, which had Ty Wilmsmeyer, Ross Lovich, a banged-up Kendall Diggs, an up-and-down Jason Jones, Will Edmondson, like just not the outfield you necessarily drew up in the offseason is like, hey, let's really shore this thing up. And so you went into this past offseason saying, hey, Arkansas's really got to go out there and get some outfielders that can hit the ball. That's what they need. Of course, you always want defense. And Arkansas's outfield defense has actually held up pretty well here for the last few weeks. I mean, I wouldn't describe it as like a superb outfield defense necessarily. But overall, it really hasn't been that big of an issue. Justin Thomas, by the way, doing a pretty good job there in center field. But Arkansas went out there and got them some outfielders that could change the game with their bats. And we've talked about it a lot on this show that, you have these big power hitters in the middle of the lineup. But lately, it's been the guys like Cam Kozeal, the guys like Logan Maxwell, and the guys like Charles Davalon who have really been driving this Razorback offense home, that have really been taking advantage of the opportunities as teams kind of cower away from these other big pieces in the lineup. So I think it's just really awesome. And to see Logan Maxwell and Charles Davalon, 2 guys that, again, were 2 of the first guys Arkansas brought in from the portal cycle this past offseason. This was their way of saying, hey, we're not about to go in to 2025 with a mediocre outfield. Let's get this Logan Maxwell kid from TCU who's hit 300 for his entire career. Oh, by the way, we taught him how to hit for power. He now has, I believe it's 8 home runs on the year. Unbelievable. Charles Davalon, who was a real, like a diamond in the rough. And he was one of those guys, you see it happen every now and then where a kid commits somewhere and then all of a sudden he gets higher regarded. He gets highly ranked and all that, mostly in the high school ranks with like football recruits. That kind of happened with Charles Davalon. Like he was not a name that everyone coming out of last season was like, oh, going to be the biggest portal pickup of the year. But when he committed to Arkansas, all these sites and all these guys who cover the sport started looking at it and said, wait a minute, we maybe missed something with this Charles Davalon kid. Arkansas might have got them something. So really good job by this coaching staff identifying some talent, going out there and getting it, and then not just bringing in the talent, taking it to a different level. I mean, this is a Charles Davalon guy who was good at Florida Gulf Coast. I mean, he hit 284, had 10 home runs, also stole 13 bases, had a fair amount of doubles, like had a really solid freshman year and was a promising piece at Florida Gulf Coast. They've turned this dude into a monster. He's now got, I believe, 9 home runs on the year. So he's about to surpass his home run total from last year, and he's doing it while facing better competition. He's hitting over 400. Let me pull up some numbers here real quick. Charles Davalon this year has worked 17 walks and been hit by 3 pitches, has only struck out 9 times all year. And he's hitting leadoff every game. I mean, that's 117 at-bats, 9 strikeouts. Not to pick on the kid, but Kendall Diggs has 11 strikeouts in, let me check, 43 at-bats. So that just tells you now Kendall Diggs likes to strike out a little bit. But Charles Davalon, this is a guy that is not only doing damage, not only getting on base, not only, carrying this Arkansas offense at times, there's also really not that much downside. Like, you don't see him stay quiet for too long. Early in the year, I feel like it took him a while to really get his footing and start really hitting the ball with authority. But yeah, because I mean, he for the first 3 weeks of the season, not that he was bad, it took him a while to find his footing. And so to see the numbers that he's put up for the entire year is actually impressive because he's done some of his best work against better competition in SEC play here. And so been blown away by the impact of both of those guys. Logan Maxwell, I mean, the power has been surprising, but the consistency we knew was there. And so these two guys are going to continue to be huge pieces in this Arkansas lineup. Could not be more thrilled with the way that they've completely transformed this Razorback lineup and transformed this outfield. So I lumped them together there. Now we are on to the pitching side of things. Our next winner of the weekend is Mr. Ben Bybee, the KC boy, junior right-handed pitcher for Arkansas. Big body, nice stuff. You've seen him a ton on the midweek outings. Had some moments here and there on the weekend. Ben Bybee was a guy that his freshman year, 2023, was the year that Arkansas had, you had Jackson Wiggins goes down before the season even starts. You had Hagen Smith and Hunter Holland, both of which they kind of changed up their roles a little bit. Hunter Holland was also banged up a good bit. Dylan Carter was thrust into action. He ends up missing a ton of time, or ends up tearing his UCL, missing the last couple of months of the year. Brady Tigard, if you guys remember, start of the year okay, ends up getting hurt and missing a huge chunk. And so there was a stretch where Arkansas in that 2023 season was just throwing anybody they could throw out there on the mound. And Ben Bybee, Parker Coyle, and Christian Fouch were 3 guys that, as true freshmen, were kind of thrust into action that they really weren't necessarily ready for and probably shouldn't have been thrown into, but it's kind of where Arkansas was at. And so Ben Bybee was a guy that was a midweek starter, got some quality experience as a freshman, but really got a welcome to the SEC type of moment. I think his ERA was over 7. The numbers were not great. His final outings down the stretch just did not go well. Matter of fact, I can remember a game, Arkansas gets swept at Georgia, and I believe Ben Bybee gave up a walk-off grand slam, which just as a pitcher, as a baseball player, cannot imagine a worse feeling than giving up a walk-off grand slam. And so, Ben Bybee was kind of forged by the fire, had a freshman year where, like I said, got a ton of experience, but it wasn't necessarily great experience. Comes back as a sophomore, and he missed the first part of the year with mono. I almost said monologue, like I was an actor. Mononucleosis, is that what it's actually called? We're just going to call it mono, the kissing disease. Ben Bybee, maybe he's a little too active on Dixon Street, ends up missing the first portion of the season, but ends up working back into that midweek starter role as a sophomore. His numbers across the board were much, much better from freshman to sophomore year. Walk rate was down, strikeout rate was up, ERA comes down, just didn't get hit around as much, made some strides, made some steps in the right direction, but wasn't quite an arm that Arkansas was using consistently on the weekend. Didn't really break into like a full definitive setup, closing role, anything like that. Had a really nice outing in the postseason. And so coming into their junior year now, Christian Fouch, by the way, Parker Coyle, those other guys in his class, Christian Fouch was a guy we were all expecting to be, if not the closer, at least a setup guy and a high leverage arm Arkansas was going to use. He's getting billed by all these, perfect game, D1 baseball, everything they're all saying this guy's going to be awesome and he's going to be one of the top pitchers, relief pitchers taken in the draft. And Parker Coyle and Ben Bybee were guys that coming into the year, I listed them as X factors because I wasn't sure what their role was going to end up being, but you kind of think, all right, are they going to really take that next step forward and really be arms for Arkansas on the weekend? Parker Coyle, dude's been unbelievable. I mean, he might be the best Arkansas pitcher so far this season. He's got an ERA of 0.6, and Christian Fouch, it hasn't really worked out for him. But Bybee, I feel like was that guy that was kind of always forgotten about, always kind of the guy you overlooked. Not that nobody, people were out on Bybee or anything like that, but when you're thinking about this Arkansas pitching staff, you think of all the shiny new toys, the young freshmen like Carson Wiggins who are throwing 100, or the big time transfers like a Zach Root, Landon Beidelshees, or all these other pieces that kind of catch our attention. A lot of times you overlook the guy who's just been there, trucking away, working, getting better, slowly building towards what he's now become, which is a legitimate SEC arm that can shut down games on the weekend. And that's exactly what Ben Bybee did the other day. We'll pull up the numbers real quick. 4 innings pitched, 2 hits, 0 runs, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts. And I really liked after the game, Dave Van Horn was addressing the team, and he said, Ben, that game was yours. We weren't taking you out, buddy. It was all you, and you got it done. And I think that's awesome, man. Good to see the coaching staff put him in that situation with a couple other guys down, a couple other guys struggling. Ben Bybee gets his number called and makes the absolute most of it. Enters into a 3-2 game. Arkansas winds up winning 7-3. Could not ask for much more. So not only was he a winner of the weekend because of how good his outing was, because obviously, he was a huge part. He literally was the winning pitcher in game 3. Huge part of why Arkansas was able to finish off that sweep. But I also think he's a winner of the weekend because I think he kind of announced himself as, hey, I'm no longer that young kid who was struggling on the road at Georgia and getting thrust into all these moments. I'm no longer the guy who is stuck in that midweek role and can't quite make my way into the weekend rotation or that weekend, bullpen mix. He's here now. He's a bona fide circle of trust guy, a guy that Arkansas, I'm sure, is going to go to in other situations. And look, I'm not saying Ben Bybee every week for the rest of the year should be pencil him in for 4 innings. This is kind of a unique situation. But I think he's a guy that when you're looking at your list of options and you've got Aiden Jimenez has been really awesome here lately. He's certainly a guy that you're going to trust. Carson Wiggins gave up a run the other day. I think he's been really good. Certainly going to be a guy you can trust. Parker Coyle, you get him back, you'll feel good about him. Gage Wood's going to come back here in the next couple weeks. So you add potentially him or Beidelshees or Gaeckle into this bullpen mix, along with the way the starting rotation's been lining up. Arkansas's got them some options, and Ben Bybee is no doubt one of those guys. And I think there's a few other guys that didn't pitch this weekend that can also help. I think Fouch, we have not seen the last of him. McIntyre, we have not seen the last of him. We're going to see some of these other guys, Colin Fisher, Cole Gibbler, just a few other names to throw out there. But I feel like Ben Bybee has just quietly, slowly but surely worked his way up this depth chart. And now all of a sudden he's working himself into some real roles. Could not be happier for him. Could not be happier for his family. Just really cool to see that. Hog fans sometimes don't appreciate the guys, and not all Hog fans. I know the guys that listen to this show, I know y'all are good Hog fans, but sometimes I feel like we don't appreciate the guys who have just been here for year after year and have quietly been in the shadows, getting better and getting better. Like Jake Faraday last year, he was one of my favorite stories of the year. A guy that could have transferred, could have gone anywhere else. He decided to stick it out at Arkansas and see if he could work his way into this pitching staff. And if you can work your way into a role in this pitching staff, you can work your way into a role in pretty much any pitching staff, even into pro ball. And so Ben Bybee, I think, is certainly going to end up getting himself in that mix as a potential draft pick this summer. But I also think he's got a ton of big-time innings left to give this Arkansas team. The fastball was awesome. We haven't really talked about the stuff. I've been talking about the narrative standpoint. I loved how electric his fastball was. He was 93, 95 consistently, held that velocity through 4 innings. Threw about 60 pitches, held that velocity for a while, got a ton of swings and misses with it. I believe the final pitch he threw was an elevated fastball, swing and miss. So it's got that late life, got that carry to it. Certainly always knew he had that in the tank. The breaking stuff is what really stuck out to me. He mixed in a little bit of the curveball at that 78, 81 range. The slider was kind of his go-to out pitch. He was getting some swings and misses with that as well. A lot of times when I've been critical of Ben Bybee, it's that he'll get down 0-2 and then just hang a slider, and you're like, damn, come on, we got to put these guys away. Maybe throw one off the zone. He threw a couple pitches in this outing There was a particular time he got a hitter 0-2, and he throws a slider that was just about 4 inches off the plate. And the guy takes it, but Helfert gave him one of those, like, stick his glove out, like, hey, that was exactly the pitch I wanted you to throw right there. And then the next pitch, 1-2 count, dots one almost in the exact same spot, gets a swing and miss. Those are the kind of pitches right there. And that's just one example. Those are the kind of sequences that are going to take this dude to the next level. If he can continually get swings and misses with his break and stuff, his fastball's more than electric. He was locating it really well. And he was pitching backwards a little bit, starting guys off with off speed, then putting them away with the fastball. Then sometimes he was locating the fastball and then putting them away with the slider. I mean, it was really good stuff, man. You could not ask for much more. Could not have asked for a more encouraging outing from Ben Bybee. Cannot say enough about him, man. I was blown away with how well he pitched and how well he just handled the moment, man. I think that's going to be a huge confidence boost for him moving forward. Keeping it going with the pitching and keeping it going with the right-handed pitching. Speaking about a guy who needed a confidence boost, Gabe Gaeckle. He is my winner of the weekend, and this may be a little bit of a controversial pick because I don't, this wasn't like the outing where, he just goes out there and mows them down for 7 innings, racks up 12 strikeouts or anything crazy like that, where it's abundantly clear he's back and he's full throttle. But I thought Gabe Gaeckle was really impressive and really solid for Arkansas in game 2. Gets the start, goes 5 2/3, gives up 6 hits, kind of scattered around some singles here and there. Like the 6 hits sounds like a big number. Did a good job spreading them out where it wasn't like he was constantly facing a ton of traffic. Gave up some 2-out singles through the left side, like stuff that's really not going to beat you too bad. He was really close to getting out of this outing with 6 innings pitched and just the 1 run. Ends up giving up a 2-out single in the 6th inning before Arkansas finally made the move. But threw about 92 pitches, strikes out 7, and does not walk anybody. Again, I thought this is a nice bounce back outing for Gabe Gaeckle to just kind of show people, hey, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not bad. I'm still, figuring this thing out. And, people forget sometimes, you get these shiny new toys and, you want to throw them into the fire. You want to throw them into these situations. And Gabe Gaeckle was a guy last year. Arkansas had him closing games and everyone was saying, man, why don't you just start him? I mean, he's clearly good. He's clearly, got the stuff to do it. Just start him. Like, why don't we just do that? And, which, Arkansas clearly, it was in the back of their mind. They were thinking about doing it, but there's a reason why you don't rush these guys into these situations. It's a developed skill that you have to learn how to face an SEC lineup 2-3 times, work through it. And Gabe Gaeckle in his first few SEC starts was actually pretty good against Ole Miss, goes 4 innings, ends up striking out 8. And then I remember there was a weird long inning where Arkansas ends up pulling them after 4, but I thought he could have given them another one. So he pitched well, held Ole Miss down pretty well, battled some adversity, but wasn't able to get the length. Last week, I thought he got a quick hook, and we've covered that enough. I was not pleased with the way he was yanked out of that game last week. Thought that he could have gone on a little bit longer. I thought it was important for him. Like I said, 5 2/3. Would have liked to see him get that 3rd out, get through 6 innings, have it officially be a quality start. But I thought the other day was a very positive experience in the long-term development of Gabe Gaeckle. He's gone 5 innings a few times now this year. I think the more he does that, the more he gets comfortable doing that. He's gonna feel more comfortable in those settings, and he'll do it even easier. He certainly has the stuff. Like there should be no debate about, does he have the right stuff? Does he have the right skill set to be a starter? I mean, he throws 4 pitches, throws the slider, throws the changeup, throws the curveball, throws a fastball as good as anyone. He's got different weapons to throw to lefty, righty, and kind of like the other day, what he did was he was pretty much fastball slider the entire time through his first trip through the order. And then he starts getting through another trip. Now you start seeing the breaking ball a little bit more. Now he's mixing in that change up to lefties. Like, he seems to have a pretty good understanding, a pretty advanced feel for how to face a lineup multiple times. And like I said, he's going to get more experience doing it. And I think he's only going to learn and grow from this. I thought it was just really good for him to go out there, give Arkansas a solid outing, and just make it clear, hey, I'm still here. I'm still good. You can depend on me. We're going to be all right. And so will Arkansas end up, keeping him in the rotation? Will they make a move? Who knows? I thought he did enough, in this past start here to there shouldn't be any controversy. I think if you were going to move somebody, you'd probably be looking over at Landon Beidelshees, who's been pretty solid, but is the guy that initially was not in the starting rotation to start the year, or at least in week 2. So we'll see what it looks like when Gage Wood comes back. But I think Gabe Gaeckle, he's a true sophomore right now. I think this time next year, we're going to be talking about him as one of the best pitchers in the entire country. Like I still remain firm in my belief of his skill set and his upside. And I mean, this is a guy that like a month ago, we were all talking about as a potential top 5, top 10 pick. Now he might not end up being that, but I think some people maybe closed the book a little too early on Gabe Gaeckle's career and his development. And so it was good to see him pitch well. And again, the reason I have him as a winner of the weekend is because I thought his outing was really big for this team overall. Because when you think about this Razorback pitching staff, like I said, they've got options. They've got, like, if he can't get the job done, they'll put someone in the starting rotation that can. They've got multiple options. Hell, Aiden Jimenez, Ben Bybee. These are guys that technically, if you really wanted to, could throw out there and start on the weekend. So Arkansas, it's not a huge deal if Gabe Gaeckle can't do it. But him being able to show he can stay in that starting rotation allows you to keep some of your other arms in important bullpen roles. And in my opinion, allows you to slot Gage Wood into a bullpen role when he returns and just kind of gives a little bit of a boost to that bullpen. And so really proud of Gabe and the way he fought, the way he pitched. And I also think it was just a very important weekend for the Arkansas Razorbacks as a whole. Another guy who has done a good job of kind of elevating the standard in this pitching staff is Zach Root. He's my 5th winner of the weekend. He is also the SEC co-pitcher of the week. Now, of course, you may say, "Oh, well, how'd you have Gaeckle as a winner of the weekend and not Root?" Well, I have both of them as winners of the weekend. Root was the best pitcher for Arkansas this weekend. I feel like it's hard for a 7 2/3 scoreless outing to fly under the radar, but there was so much that happened throughout this weekend. I feel like we all kind of forgot how freaking good Zach Root was on Friday night. He was in a battle with J.D. Thompson, another really good left-handed pitcher in the SEC who's been in this league before and is going to have many really good outings. And it started off, J.D. Thompson retires the first 6 Arkansas Razorbacks he faces. Zach Root was kind of matching him. It looked like we were going to be in for a pitcher's duel. Did not turn out to be that way. Root ends up going, like I said, 7 2/3, allows 3 hits and 3 walks without allowing a run. Little bit deceptive because I believe he gave up 2 walks and a hit in his final inning, that 0.2 there before Aiden Jimenez came in and cleaned it up for him. I mean, he was lights out, man. There really wasn't much traction going on. Wasn't much going on the base pads. Didn't really allow that Vanderbilt offense to ever really get a groove. And, like I was talking about with Gabe Gaeckle, in terms of facing a lineup 1, 2, 3 times, you want to talk about a guy who has the requisite skills to do that. It's Zach Root. I mean, he just keeps these hitters guessing. His fastball, by the way, was very electric. I mean, his fastball touched 96. He was getting tons of swings and misses, locating it really well. I thought that was the most dynamic his stuff has looked all year. And as always, the changeup is the difference maker for him. Teams always like to do this where they load up their lineup with righties against Zach Root and don't realize his best pitch is his changeup. If you look at his splits, there's not much separation between right or left, and it's because of that changeup. And he's also got 2 different breaking balls he's throwing at guys. He's got the cutter to kind of get guys off the barrel a little bit, get some easy ground out, some weak contact. And so, I think he threw was like right around. He ended up throwing 100 pitches in this game, and he was 1 pitch away from getting through 8 innings. And so he continues to be a very efficient with his pitch count. You don't see him running into too many 3-ball counts. He usually has a pretty good understanding of which hitters he needs to come right after, which hitters he needs to be a little bit more careful with. And so he's not always going to be dominant. He's not always going to be throwing shutouts. But I think week to week, he's going to give Arkansas a chance to win. He's going to work deep into these ball games. If you look at Zach Root's numbers real quick, I said the other day that I feel like his outing against Ole Miss, we're going to look back on and say that was a complete outlier, and we're going to say, what the hell happened there? He gives up 10 hits, 7 runs, and I know that was cause for a lot of concern. I feel like he's alleviated a good bit of that. But yeah, if you look at the rest of his outings, he's gone 5 innings in every other outing. He hasn't given up more than 3 runs in any other outing. He usually has a good strikeout to walk ratio. Like, it really, the more you start to accumulate the sample size, it definitely is just looking more and more like a complete fluke, that Ole Miss game. And I don't, fluke is probably a stretch. Credit to Ole Miss. They did a good job getting after him. But I think when it's all said and done, we should all feel pretty good about Zach Root. I hope these last couple weeks have done a lot to regain that confidence from the Arkansas fans that he's that guy that you can count on Friday nights. And so, after the Ole Miss weekend, I remember there was a lot of people that were like, man, our starting pitching is just not good. We just don't have an ace. where's Hagen Smith? And like all that's fair and valid. Of course, Arkansas doesn't have a Hagen Smith. They don't have anyone that dominant. But I think you look at some of these guys. I mean, Root is as good as anyone in the SEC. He's gone toe-to-toe with some really good starting pitchers. I think he's going to be among those top 4 to 6 pitchers in the league. I think Gaeckle's a guy that when it's all said and done throughout his career is going to end up playing as long as any of these dudes. He's going to get better and better. He's already gotten better and better throughout this year. I think he's going to have some other big-time moments. And so do either of those qualify as a true bona fide ace? I don't know, but those are 2 options you can feel really good about. And Landon Beidelshees, who I mentioned, by the way, not necessarily dominant. I wouldn't even describe his outing yesterday as great or even good. He goes 5 innings. He gives up 3 runs, all of which came on the 1 3-run home run swing. But I feel like he does a good job at eating innings and just kind of giving Arkansas a chance, which when you get to Sunday, usually most teams are kind of running on fumes. Arkansas has been in a position when they get to Sunday where they have a few options available. Only needed 1 option in Ben Bybee the other day. But I think for the role that Landon Beidelshees has been asked to play for this Razorback team, I think he's done an okay job. And I think you can kind of live with it given that Root and Gaeckle continue to be what they've been the last couple of weeks. And assuming that the bullpen continues to do what it's done as well. And you get some of these other arms back. And so I know there's a tendency anytime someone's not great to just yank them out of their role. But I actually think starting on Sundays is more of a low leverage role than closing games, if you ask me. And so when it comes to like, if you think Gage Wood is way better than Landon Beidelshees, is it really in your best interest to have Gage Wood start the game and have Landon Beidelshees close it? Like, I actually think it makes a little bit more sense if you love Gage Wood, which I do, I think we all do, and think he's a better option. Wouldn't you rather have him at the end of the game when the game's on the line and you can maybe use him twice a weekend? And so these are kind of some of the decision-making thought processes that this Razorback coaching staff is going to have to deal with the next couple of weeks. And I do not envy them having to make that decision, but ultimately my stance is the way it has been really all offseason. If you go back to the summer and really the fall and spring leading up to the season, when we talked about this starting rotation, I kept saying, I don't really care. Like, I think these 4 guys, Root, Beidelshees, Gaeckle, and Wood, are all going to be good. I think they're all going to pitch a ton of innings. I trust all of them. I don't really care what role it ends up being in. Like, I think it kind of makes sense having Beidelshees as a starter with Wood to close, but we also saw Gage Wood look pretty good in a starting role. And so it's not going to hurt my feelings one bit if that's the route they decide to go. Ultimately, you just want to have your guys that you trust out there in the big moments, and Arkansas's got plenty of those. And so that'll do it for this weekend's this week's edition of Weekend Winners. Appreciate you guys for tapping in. Again, appreciate you guys always for your love of baseball and for tapping in with the show. Sorry it's a little bit delayed today. That's what happens whenever Big Z enters the portal. We get pushed back a little bit on our schedule. But I appreciate you guys for always supporting the show. Leave us a like, leave us a thumbs up, leave us a review if you're listening on non-podcast, whatever you got to do. Your support means a lot and is not lost on me, man. I really appreciate everybody who listens and everybody that loves Razorback baseball and loves talking ball. And so let's have a great Monday, everyone. Y'all get out of here. We'll be back tomorrow to recap Arkansas versus Grambling. Going to be a thriller in Dickey Stevens. Let's have a great day. Woo pig.